precisely 1:15. This is the news on Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. News is edited by Dhanushka Madhavela, read by Sabrina Zawahir. The headlines. Sri Lanka will host the 37th session of the Asia-Pacific Regional Conference of Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The inaugural session of the conference will be presided over by President Ranil Wickremesinghe on next Tuesday. U.S. Under-Secretary for Public Diplomacy and the Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources to visit Sri Lanka. Over 840,000 passenger arrivals were facilitated by the 3 international airports in Sri Lanka in January 2024. Former Minister Gamini Jayawickrama Perera passes away. And in world news, Trump banned from running his own businesses. And in sports news, the 5th edition of Lanka Premier League will be played from July 1st to July 21st this year. Now the local news in detail. Sri Lanka will host the 37th session of the Asia-Pacific Regional Conference of Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The event is scheduled to be held as a high-level ministerial in-person event in Colombo from next Monday to Thursday. The state of food and agriculture in the region, agri-food systems, transformation and solutions particularly for smallholders and family farmers are slated to be deliberated during the conference. The inaugural session of the 37th session of conference will be presided over by President Ranil Wickremesinghe on next Tuesday. By hosting the conference, Sri Lanka demonstrates the country's dedication to the growth of sustainable agriculture, not just at home but across the region, and showcases its commitment to being partners in sustainable agricultural development. The conference agenda will include a forum on agritourism specially requested by the Sri Lankan government. This forum will give high-level delegates arriving in the island from across the Asia-Pacific region the opportunity to recognize Sri Lanka's viability as an agritourism destination, further developing the nation's agritourism sector and bringing in valuable foreign exchange. Under-Secretary of State for Public Diplomacy Les Allen is on travel to Jordan, Sri Lanka and India from February 12 to 22nd. The visit underscores the United States' unwavering commitment to reinforcing and expanding partnerships and alliances. The trip highlights the core of U.S. foreign policy and public diplomacy initiatives, fostering freedom of expression, economic empowerment, and global collaboration. Under-Secretary Allen will travel to Colombo, Sri Lanka, to reaffirm U.S. support for Sri Lanka's economic recovery and to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. Her agenda includes fostering dialogue on freedom of expression and democratic values with diverse groups of stakeholders, including journalists, civil society members, government officials, and the embassy's Youth Forum. Her engagements with the Sri Lanka Press Institute, U.S. Public Diplomacy Program alumni, and local content creators will emphasize the critical role of preserving diverse voices for a stable and inclusive Sri Lanka. Additionally, she will meet with representatives from Sri Lanka's multi-faith community to underscore the importance of societal inclusivity. Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources Richard R. Verma will travel to India, Maldives and Sri Lanka on February 18 to 23rd to strengthen the United States' cooperation with each of these key Indo-Pacific partners. Shortly following the 2-year anniversary of the U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy, his trip will reaffirm the United States' enduring commitment to a free, open, secure and prosperous region. Deputy Secretary Verma will conclude his trip in Colombo, Sri Lanka. His meetings with senior officials will support U.S.-Sri Lankan defense and maritime security cooperation. The Deputy Secretary will visit the port of Colombo's West Container Terminal, where the United States is supporting Sri Lanka's ongoing economic recovery through $553 million in financing to transform Colombo into a regional shipping hub. Finally, he will meet with civil society leaders to hear their perspectives on democratic governance in Sri Lanka and with government officials to voice US support for the protection of free speech and open discourse. This news is brought to you by Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Continuing local news, the Airport and Aviation Services Sri Lanka Limited says that over 840,000 passenger arrivals were facilitated by 3 international airports in Sri Lanka in January 2024. Issuing a statement, the AASL said the passenger figures in January 2024 at Sri Lankan airports indicate a promising growth of tourist arrivals, as Sri Lankan airports had facilitated 846,173 total passenger arrivals. The AASL said among the tourist arrivals, 207,182 tourists had travelled through all the airports: Katanaik Airport, Jaffna International Airport and the Mattala Airport. Meanwhile, Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport facilitated 11,801 international tourist arrivals with 102 flight operations and total passenger movements of 23,739. Further, the Jaffna International Airport facilitated 3,413 international passenger movements and 271 domestic passenger movements in January 2024. Meanwhile, a special discussion was held recently to promote the tourism sector in Batticaloa district. The discussion was held under the patronage of Batticaloa District Secretary Mrs. Jacinta Muralidharan at the Batticaloa District Secretariat. Investors and interested parties from various sectors participated. Discussions were focused on implementing special programs to attract local and international tourists. Officials, including the chairman of the Eastern Province Tourism Bureau, were also participated in the meeting. Former Minister Gamini Jayavikrama Pereira passed away at the age of 83 this morning. He was born in 1941 and was educated at Nalanda College in Colombo. He was a politician and a member of parliament representing the United National Party from Kurunegala electoral district. He was first elected to the parliament in 1994. During his political career, Pereira has held ministerial portfolios for sustainable development, wildlife, Buddha Sasana, food protection, water management and irrigation. With that, we conclude the local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Sinhala Vedamahatmya.
Ports, Shipping and Aviation Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva announced the signing of a direct air service agreement between Israel and Sri Lanka yesterday. Speaking at a press briefing themed Collective Path to a Stable Country at the President's Media Centre, Minister De Silva highlighted the agreement's focus on preventing delays in Sri Lankan workers' migration abroad. The agreement signed between the Israeli Ministry of Transport and our Minister of Ports, Shipping and Aviation marks the beginning of direct flights between Israel and Sri Lanka, aiming to enhance passenger convenience, Minister De Silva stated. He further elaborated on the agreement's objective of facilitating prompt overseas employment for Sri Lankan workers and noted the interest of many Israelis in visiting Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, the minister also said negotiations have commenced with Indigo Airlines to introduce an additional daily flight service to India via Palali Airport. Furthermore, an expression of interest has been called for the development of Mattala Airport. Following the selection of an investor by the tender board, negotiations are nearing conclusion with the possibility of reaching an agreement next week. This endeavour, proposed as a joint Russian and Indian private project, holds the potential to render the airport profitable. In response to a traffic congestion at Katanaik Airport, plans are underway to introduce 31 ticket windows and a new terminal building, with construction slated to begin within 2 weeks, the minister explained. That was main news.
The main news story was brought to you by Sinhala Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to Watchlight. The National Water Supply and Drainage Board announced that a 16-hour water cut will be imposed in some parts of Colombo today. According to the Water Board, the water supply will be disrupted from 5 p.m. today until 9 a.m. tomorrow. The water cut will be imposed in the Colombo 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15 areas during this period. That came to you in Watchlight.
Coming up, World News.
Taking a look at the headlines of the world news, Trump banned from running his own businesses. Ukraine troops leave embattled eastern town of Avdiivka. Mass protest in Hungary over a child abuse case. Now the world news in detail. A New York judge has temporarily barred former U.S. President Donald Trump from running his businesses in the state and ordered him and his organization to pay $354 million in fraud damages for submitting false business reports. Friday's civil court ruling by Judge Arthur Engoron includes a 3-year ban on Trump serving as an officer or director of any New York business, including the Trump Organization. Trump and his company also were barred from applying for any bank loans in New York. The monetary damages were imposed on the ex-president and other Trump Organization executives, including his 2 elder sons. Trump and his business associates were accused of using exaggerated asset valuations to obtain favorable terms on loans and insurance policies. Ukraine's military says it has withdrawn its troops from Avdiivka, the key eastern town, for months besieged by Russian forces. Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Alexander Svyazhsky, said he acted to avoid encirclement and preserve the lives and health of service personnel. His deputy said the Russians had a huge artillery advantage. Avdiivka, a gateway to the Russian-seized city of Donetsk, he has engulfed the fierce fighting for months and is now almost completely destroyed. It has been a battlefield town since 2014, when Russian-backed fighters seized large swathes of the eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The fall of Avdiivka marks the biggest change on more than 1,000 kilometers long front line since Russian troops seized the nearby town of Bakhmut in May 2023. Tens of thousands of people in Hungary have protested following a presidential pardon in a child sexual abuse case that has shocked the nation. Demonstrators packed the historic Hero Square in the capital, Budapest, in solidarity with abuse victims. President Katalin Novak and 2 senior figures in Prime Minister Viktor Orban's ruling Fidesz party last week resigned over the controversial pardon. Separately, a bishop who advised a right-wing PM has now also quit. Zoltán Balogh admitted he had supported Ms. Novak's pardon for the deputy director of a children's home who has been convicted of covering up sexual abuse by his boss. The scandal has become the biggest threat to Mr. Orban's conservative rule since he returned to power in 2010, says the BBC's Nick Thorpe is Budapest. That ends World News. Prior to concluding the World News, the headlines of the World News once again. Trump banned from running his own businesses. Ukraine troops leave embattled eastern town Avdiivka. Mass protest in Hungary over child abuse case. That ends World News. Moving on to development news. Director General, Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, Nalin Pereira, says that Sri Lanka tourism is set to obtain over 7 billion rupees from tourism receipts this year. He said that out of this, around 5.18 billion rupees will be from embarkation fees and a further 2,087 billion rupees will be received from the Tourism Development Levy. He said that from this, 70% will go towards the Sri Lanka Tourism Promotions Bureau, 14% for Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, and 12% to Sri Lanka Institute of Tourism and Hotel Management, and the rest to the Conventions Bureau. That was development news.
Moving on with sports news.
Taking a look at sports news, the first T20 international match between Afghanistan tour of Sri Lanka will be played today. The match will be played at Dambulla International Cricket Stadium. The match will commence at 7:15 p.m. The fifth edition of the Lanka Premier League will be played from July 1st to July 21st this year. This means the tournament will clash with Major League Cricket and the T20 Blast. The second season of MLC starts on July 4th and the final likely on July 28th, while the T20 Blast will run from May 30th to September 14th. There was a similar overlap last year as well, which meant the LPL struggled to attract foreign talent given the money on offer, but it has nevertheless enjoyed some popularity among local fans. More in sports news is a little bit of golf. Tiger Woods withdrew due to illness during the second round on his PGA Tour return at the Genesis Invitational. Woods, 48, who hosts the tournament at the Rivera Country Club, was driven off the course on a cart shortly after teeing off on the 7th hole. That was sports news.
Go ekak thiyana youth eකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න as වහගෙන දැකපු හින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
The Embassy of Sri Lanka in Iran organized Ceylon Persia Tourism Awareness Program 2024 at the Chancery premises in Tehran on 5th February. This event was organized in collaboration with the Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Bureau, Association of Air Transport and Tourists Agencies of Iran, and Aitken Spence Travels. Over 35 tour companies, outbound tour operators and representatives from the media and airlines were in attendance. The objective of the event was to make awareness of the recent developments in tourism industry in Sri Lanka and Iran among travel agents, tour operators, other tourism stakeholders and the general public of both countries, with a focus of expanding two-way tourism. That came to you in Business News.
Business News, sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Go ekak thiyana youth එකට life එකේ change එකට නියමෙට set වෙන්න as වහගෙන දැකපු හින හැබැයි කරන්න youth එකට නියමෙට set වෙන friendship එක මෙන්න.
The all-new NSB Ithru account, NSB IM, a plan for your dream.
Moving on to economic news. In a ceremony held at the Ministry of Finance Auditorium, President Ranil Wickremesinghe presided over the awarding of prize checks to the winners of the lottery tickets sold in 2023 by the National Lotteries Board. President Ranil Wickremesinghe handed out the cash prizes and vehicle awards to the lucky winners of the super prizes Goviseta Mega Power and Mega Power 60 lotteries. Additionally, certificates of appreciation and prizes were presented to the dedicated lottery sales representatives. Amidst the excitement, the NLB introduced its latest offering, the Ada Sampatha, a new lottery ticket, with the inaugural ticket being presented to President Wickremesinghe by the chairman of the NLB. That came to you in economic news.
Weather report.
Several spells of light showers will occur in eastern and over provinces and in Polonnaruwa, Matale and Nuwara districts. Showers or thunder showers may occur at a few places in western and Sabragamo provinces and in Galle and Mathura districts after 2 p.m. Fairly strong winds, about 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, can be expected at times in the eastern slopes of the central hills and in the northern, north-central, northwestern, Uva and eastern provinces and in Hambantota and Kandy districts. That was the weather report. Prior to concluding this bulletin of news, the headlines once again. Sri Lanka will host the 37th session of the Asia-Pacific Regional Conference of Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. The inaugural session of the conference will be presided over by President Ranil Wickremesinghe on next Tuesday. U.S. Under-Secretary for Public Diplomacy and the Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources to visit Sri Lanka. Over 840,000 passenger arrivals were facilitated by the 3 international airports in Sri Lanka in January 2024. Former Minister Gamini Jayavikrama Pereira passes away. With that, we conclude the news, and over to my friend and certainly yours, who's all geared up to keep you entertained with a wonderful collection of music indeed. Over to you, Asanka.
Thank you, Sabi. That was our Sabrina Savahir bringing you news at 1:15. Well, of course, after all of that information, time right now is 1:36, and we'll be opening the phone line shortly. Of course, that's for placing your request, because we're going to have your choice request show at 2 o'clock, and before that, we've got lunchtime music coming up, and all before all that, Sabrina, wish you a very happy afternoon, and all as a sunny Sunday as well. So that's for you, and this is Radio Sri Lanka.